Okay, let's just dive right in, because we're about to challenge something that's, it's pretty fundamental to how we think about work. We're going to talk about the productivity trap, this surprisingly common mindset that tricks you into thinking you're winning by being busy, when you might actually be sabotaging your own success.
You know that amazing feeling of crossing things off a to-do list, right? But what if that list, the very thing you rely on to get ahead, is actually the thing holding you back?
So here's the core idea we're going to unpack. We've all been sold this myth, this story, that being efficient and fast is the golden ticket to success. But according to the thinking behind this explainer, that whole idea, it's just not true.
So let's start by figuring out how this whole idea got so baked into our culture in the first place.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Our entire work culture is obsessed with being busy. We celebrate the hustle, we lionize the 5 a.m. club, and we use apps to optimize every single minute. We've been taught to believe one simple equation. All this activity, it must equal achievement.
But what happens when that belief smacks into reality? Well, the source material for this explainer shares a personal story that just perfectly captures this whole crisis of impact.
The author was, the poster child for this productivity cult. They did everything right. Time blocking, the Pomodoro technique, a Notion setup that was a work of art. By every measure, they were a productivity machine.
And yeah, if you were keeping score using the usual metrics, speed, how many emails they answered, how many documents they produced, they were crushing it. Without a doubt, the most productive person on the team.
And then came the moment it all fell apart. During a performance review, their manager just cut through all the noise, looked past the endless list of tasks, and asked this one devastating question. All that hustle, all that efficiency, and none of it mattered without real, actual impact.
That story just perfectly sets up what we need to break down next. So let's really get into the anatomy of this trap and see how it works, and, why it's so darn easy to fall into.
And this right here, this is the official definition of the productivity trap. It's when we mistakenly believe that just doing stuff is the same as making progress. It's that feeling of being super busy, right? Clearing your inbox, checking off boxes, but you never stop to ask if any of it actually matters. It's when we care more about the process of working than the whole purpose of the work.
And this chart really shows you the two different mindsets. On the left, you have productivity culture. It's all about what's easy to measure, right? Speed, volume, how many things you can cram into a 25-minute sprint. But then on the right, you have impactful work. And that's about the stuff that's harder to measure, but is way, way more valuable. Things like deep thinking, creativity, the kind of work that actually creates the future instead of just managing today's inbox.
A big part of this trap is also psychological. The world can feel pretty chaotic, and having a perfectly organized calendar, it gives us this sense of control, even if it's kind of fragile. But that need for control makes us rigid. We get so focused on sticking to our perfect plan that we completely miss the amazing, game-changing opportunities that pop up just because they weren't on the schedule.
And where does this all inevitably lead? Yep, burnout. This constant push to just do more is a hamster wheel that never stops. And the biggest mistake we make is thinking that our best ideas come from sprinting. They don't. As this quote gets at, our breakthroughs happen in those quiet moments, the ones that productivity culture tells us are wasted time. Work and rest aren't enemies, they're partners.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem pretty thoroughly. Now for the good part. Let's talk about the solution. How do we actually climb out of this trap and start focusing on impact instead of just productivity?
It all starts by changing the fundamental question we ask ourselves every day. We have to stop asking, how can I get more done? And instead start asking, what is the single most valuable thing I can do? It's a huge shift.
And that one simple question is the key that unlocks this whole escape plan. It's a really practical, 3-step framework that's all about focusing on what matters, making time to think, and being honest about where your energy is going. So step 1 is the one thing focus. What this means is, before you get sucked into the chaos of emails and meetings, you figure out the one task that's going to create the most value that day, and you give it your absolute best, freshest energy. Everything else comes second.
Step 2 is huge. You have to schedule thinking time. And no, this isn't time for checking off little tasks. This is time for strategy, for creativity, for solving those big, messy problems that busy work always pushes to the side. You block it out on your calendar like it's your most important meeting of the day, because it is. This is where the magic happens.
And finally, step 3 is the value audit. At the end of every week, you have to look back and be ruthless. Seriously, which tasks were just busy work and which ones actually moved you closer to your real goals? This isn't about feeling guilty. It's about getting smarter so you know exactly what to say no to next week. And the result of making this shift, it's not just that your work gets better. Your entire professional identity changes. You stop taking pride in how long your to-do list is. Instead, you take pride in the real, tangible impact you're creating in the world. So, that really leaves us with one final thought, a question for you. When you wake up tomorrow and start your day, what are you going to measure? The number of things you did or the value of what you created? Are you going to measure your activity or are you going to measure your impact?